So this next question comes to us from Steve. He's a portfolio manager at an established enterprise, a larger company. And he asks, I think it's somewhat rhetorical because Steve, I think, probably has his own ideas here, but he asks, how do we make sure that we're filing high quality patents? And that's a difficult one. There's not a patent prosecutor alive, an attorney or an agent that you talk to that won't tell you that they do great work. But it stands to reason that not everybody can do as good a work as everybody else. But it's hard to judge. When you get these patents, they seem to be written in kind of a foreign language, right? And you'll read the claims, and they're very legal and hard to parse. So it's often very difficult to know whether or not someone's done a good job. So you might rely on a recommendation, or go to an established place, or the reputation of a particular individual, and then you just kind of cross your fingers and you hope that you get something that's pretty decent. I think a high quality patent, there's this tendency to try and get something done as inexpensively as possible. And if you can judge the quality out the other end, you can make a shrewd decision, I think, in that regard. It's really hard for the layperson to know what is a good patent or not. So in this regard, I kind of lay out what when I pick up a patent, I'm trying to decide whether it's any good or not, is they tend not to be really short, right? A short patent might have 4 or 5 figures, and they're very high level. There's very, very little detail in them. Whereas a really good patent might have 10 to 15 figures in it. And correspondingly, when you get the draft back, is it, 3 pages long? Or is it 15 pages long or 30 pages long? Generally, the more that's said about an innovation, the more likely you're going to get better coverage, right? Because you have the ability to draw something out that perhaps wasn't in the claims initially, but is in the disclosure that you can add to the claims to have a higher likelihood of getting your patent. And I think if you're a complete layperson, and Steve really isn't, but rely on the inventors and ask some questions, whether when they read the draft, do they feel that it gets to the heart of the innovation, the thing that was most key and differentiated. And then when you look at that heart of the innovation, the thing that was most unique, is there a lot or a little bit written about it? Because often I'll pick up a patent application that I've inherited, and I'm responding to some rejection at the patent office. And it takes me a little bit of time to figure out exactly what the differentiator is, the heart of the innovation. And when I find it, I'll often say, well, let me look back in the specification, the detailed description, to find out if there's more detail. Maybe I can add a detail in there, get the patent allowed, and it still is, the patent is still related to that core idea. My heart sinks when I go back to the patent application. I find out that there's one paragraph about the thing that's most important. A good patent application is going to have at least 2 to 3 pages. It might be peppered around the disclosure here or there, but when you think about what's most important, what's most differentiated, your kind of selling point that you're trying to cover in this patent application, is it just mentioned in a cursory way, or is there a lot of detail in there? And in fact, when you get that draft back, you should be surprised at how much additional thinking has gone through around that innovation. The patent office requires a lot of the inner workings on how it works, whereas you might have come to the patent drafter and said, hey, here's kind of the marketing speak about it. Here's the advantages and stuff like that. You may have given a little bit of the detail. They really have to dig much, much deeper. And you should see that detail in your draft. So think about what the most important thing is For one, it should be captured in the claims, and sometimes it's hard to parse these claims, so ask the drafter, look, this seemed to be the salient point here, show me where it is in the claims. And, it ought to be in there. And then work your way back and say, well, okay, well, if that's the important part, how much writing is there about that? So that when I perhaps inherit that case later, and I'm looking for just a little bit more to get your patent over the finish line and get it issued, my heart doesn't sink as I sit there and say there is nothing more, right? What's in the claim, I look back and there's no additional detail when it comes to that important thing. So that kind of, does it smell right? Look, is it the right length? The figures, certainly is it accurately describing what we do? But then really get to that heart of the innovation and make sure that there is a lot of discussion from many different perspectives. It might be described in a block diagram, in a flow chart, if it's screenshot, something else, but it should be described in multiple different ways with as much detail as possible. So, Steve, I hope that answers your question. Unfortunately, there isn't, a universal answer there. But certainly I, with a lot of experience, I know it when I see it. And I know that isn't a great answer, but that should at least give you enough information so you can calibrate your compass as you read through these things. So, if anybody has any other questions or has any comments on what I've said, add them to the comments below. We look through those comments and that's how we figure out what we're going to talk about next time. So please chime in. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.